All right, folks are going to be joining us momentarily. Oh yes, I see lots of folks joining. I'm so happy to see everyone here today. So you're joining us today from the office at Indigenous Health on the unceded and ancestral homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. And I'm Nikki Zawadzki. I'm a strategic lead here at Indigenous Health, formerly known as Aboriginal Health. And I'm joined today by Vice President of Indigenous Health, Leslie Bonshor, Director of Indigenous Research, Brittany Bingham, and Director of Indigenous Women and Family Health, Miranda Kelly. A little bit about who I am and why I'm here. I'm just here to provide tech support today and help moderate the conversation. A little bit more about me. My pronouns are she or they. I'm a white settler and my people are Polish and French. And I also want to acknowledge that it's important for those of us that are non-Indigenous to stand alongside in solidarity to show our commitment and our allyship to lifting up and amplifying the voices of Indigenous folks. So on that note, I'm going to ask Leslie to take it away. Please, Leslie, after you.
Thank you so much, Nikki, and thank you for your tech support leading us through this. Hello, everyone. Welcome. First and foremost, let's place ourselves where we're standing. My feet are right now in the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh here in East Vancouver, where our office is located. And I just want to acknowledge that we have several other First Nations communities where many of you may be calling in from. So just to take a moment to review our slide on the screen right now that outlines all the other nations that we serve up to the Heiltsuk, the Klemtu, the Kitasoo, El Cacho, Huikano, which is often referred to as Rivers Inlet, and all the southern Statliam communities, and then right down to the tips here where Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish are. So thank you so much. We want to welcome you to our session in our languages. Both Miranda, Brittany, and I are all Coast Salish, so we share languages. So Aisrael, good day. Glad you could join us.
Now
I'll start off. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to invite the three of you to introduce yourself. My apologies, Leslie.
No worries. All right, so I will start first. If you could share my slide. So as Nikki mentioned, I want to ground myself in my identity of who I am and what I do. I am a mother and a grandmother, particularly in that order as a grandmother first to Carson and Benson, mother to Carly, Clayton, and Riley. I am also a sister and an auntie and a friend and a wife and life partner to Mike. This picture actually represents my community. The top photo that was back in circa 1969, I was like 3 years old. And we were having a Joe family reunion. So that's all the Joe family from the Chiacton community. We're part of the Stalo Nation. The smaller picture is that I'm sitting on my grandmother's knee, the third lady in from the left in the first row. That is my late grandmother, Ethel. And she's the one who taught me everything about who I am and what I'm meant to do. And I carry her with me every single day. So we as women, as Indigenous women, and lead with what we call a matriarchal leadership. And that's what I bring to my job, my day job, which is the Vice President of Indigenous Health here at Vancouver Coastal Health. And I've had that job for about 10 minutes now. And it's been exciting and rewarding. And I'm just so thrilled and honored to have such lovely Indigenous leaders like Miranda and Brittany as part of our team. And I thank them for joining us today and sharing their wisdom. Over to you, Brittany.
Itaquail tu Kmesiaya. My name is Brittany Bingham. I go by the pronouns she, her. I'm the Director of Indigenous Research here at Vancouver Coastal Health, Indigenous Health. I am of mixed ancestry and a proud member of the Seashaw First Nation on the beautiful Sunshine Coast. And my role is actually a joint role also with the Center for Gender and Sexual Health Equity. And I am also an assistant professor of social medicine at UBC. As Leslie mentioned, I just also want to ground myself. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, my two beautiful children here, Natalie and Sean, and really, hold my matriarchs close to me in all the work that I do here and in my research and guiding each and every day. I'll pass off to Miranda.
Sorry, my slides are a little slow. There we go.
Israel, Tilyan Telsqui, Talitzalquathwali. My ancestral name is Tilyan. I'm Stalo, a member of Sawali First Nation. The bottom left photo shows my grandparents. My grandparents on my dad's side come from Sumas, Sawali, Cowichan, and Snuneymuxw First Nations. And on my mom's side, my grandparents come from Russia, Scotland, and Wales. When Leslie asked us to pull together some photos or photo of our family, of course, I do what I do, and I started overthinking, like, well, what does family really mean? And I think about this in the context of my work as well. I'm the director of Indigenous Women and Family Health, and what does family mean? So the top slide shows me and my family on my side and my husband's side, gathering to celebrate my daughter's second birthday, my youngest daughter there. I locate myself within this family as a wife, as a mother, as a daughter, a sister, an auntie, and a friend. Some of our closest friends are there too, celebrating with us. And I also locate myself within community. I mentioned that my ancestral name is Tilyan. That name comes from my family on Vancouver Island, my dad's mom's side of the family. And when I received that name in ceremony, my matriarchs told me very loudly and clearly that this is a gift and you carry with you responsibility. This is a gift not to take lightly. You're responsible to serve your people and to take care of your own family and to take care of other families around you in your community. So as I do this work, I think about accountability and who am I accountable to? And I'm accountable to my family. I'm accountable to my bloodlines, but also to my chosen family. So the photo on the bottom right is my birth worker family. I come to this work as a doula, as a childbirth educator, and a member of the Indigenous birth worker community. And so that's a photo of some of my beautiful teachers that I walk alongside in the birth world. And I feel a strong sense of accountability to them too, as Indigenous mothers and aunties and matriarchs and knowledge keepers in our community. Thank you. That's all I have to share for now.
Right, so I just want to talk for just a brief moment about the content today. So some of the discussion that might come up today might be upsetting or triggering for folks. And it's normal to feel uncomfortable with these topics. Get comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable. That's part of how we learn, right? And some of it's very emotional. So I invite you to take care of yourself today and draw on supports if you're struggling. Just a gentle reminder that our Indigenous colleagues already have a lot to deal with right now. And so please don't burden them further with the requests for information or education. They already do enough in emotional labor. And so we're going to provide a list of supports and resources at the end of today's session. But if you need to step out, this session will be recorded and you can come back and watch the recording later. So thank you. Thank you everyone for your kindness and participation today. All right, I'm going to turn it back to you, Leslie.
Thank you so much. Yes, I see there are 371 participants right now, and that's thrilling. I'm excited to see such a great interest from our Vancouver Coastal Health friends and colleagues. So this is a first session, which we've titled TRC Talks. So TRC stands for Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There are 94 calls to action from this commission. And many of them you're hearing about right now after the horrific findings at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. So our intention really is about coming together in a circle, us as Indigenous leaders in healthcare, also guests. We will have different guests every week as we move this forward. And I have no end date to this. I think we're just going to keep having these talks until nobody wants to hear from us anymore. Or maybe we've covered all 94 calls to action, and maybe we'll start over again and talk about how far we've come. So we intend to, channel our collective grief and outrage. And really for us, we're always in some sort of mild state of outrage of what's going on for our Indigenous population. And we use it as fuel to continue this work. And I know that's the only thing that's really gotten me through many, many years of doing this work. Next slide, please. Our format is going to be what we call and have coined Aunties Circle. So this is really us pretending as if we are sitting around the kitchen table, having a conversation as Indigenous women, as aunties, advice that we would talk to friends, colleagues, family members about. And we've really coined this pulling from the headlines. And is that the next slide, Nikki? Sorry.
It's coming up.
Okay, sorry. Is this still me?
It's
Yeah,
still you,
okay. I just want to make sure. We should have rehearsed more. No, this is capital P personal. So as mentioned, we are Indigenous people. We outlined and gave you our backgrounds and introduced ourselves in the way that we are, positioning ourselves in our role with our family and our community, which is first and foremost before our paid jobs. So no matter what, that's what we come to this work with. In our capital P, I come as a grandmother first and foremost. I want to make sure that anything I do, the words that I say, any decision or recommendation I make in my role is grounded back into what will my grandsons and their children receive as care, as an understanding. And also I look back to my ancestors, all of those people in that photo, particularly my grandmother. Would she be proud? Would she know that I did my best? And so that's what we mean about being grounded in this work from a capital P, personal. I know other people say, oh, it's so personal, I'm so passionate about this. It's different. We're talking about our relations. We're talking about cousins and cousins and cousins. And this is why we use that term, all our relations. And this picture from our friend Tanya Talaga from one of her books called All Our Relations is because somehow, no matter what, we're all connected. Thank you, Nikki.
There we go. Sorry. Yeah, I've got a little lag on my computer today. All right, so now we're going to do a Slido word cloud. So if you just hang on, I'm going to pull up my Slido here, everyone. Thanks for your patience. Here we go. I'm going to start that. And I'm going to share it with participants. Oh no, hang on, just a moment. Slido and I are just becoming new friends. And so that's what's going on here. All right. Should be working. Is it not working, Jake? Oh, describe one word on how you're feeling today. So go to slido.com and enter the code 535017. And let's see if I can present it. This is what it's supposed to look like, I think. Thanks for your patience, everybody. The new world of Zoom sometimes. Here we are. People are already entering. Tired, heavy, emotional, frustrated, unsteady, exhausted, determined, heartbroken. So much is coming through. Optimistic, bogged down, burnt out, somber, grateful. I see overwhelmed coming through a lot, and sad and heavy and angry. Responsibility. Yeah, we've got a lot coming up. I know while we were preparing for this talk, the four of us, we talked a lot about feelings of outrage. That was something that came up as you were just saying, Leslie, like, and I see it's coming through here too with folks feeling angry and weary and Oh, there's outraged, frustrated. Yeah. All right, so we're getting a bit of a read of what's going on here. I'm just gonna share my slides again. Thanks for your patience. I'll go back to here. All right, so let me just advance us. Here we go. So now we're going to talk about the headlines. You wanted us to talk about some headlines, Leslie.
Yeah, the idea of pulling from the headlines was really just to give us an opportunity to sit with these headlines for a moment and feel what we've just been sharing in Slido, that this is absolutely heartbreaking to have to, open up your social media, open up your newspapers and see these kinds of headlines, how thousands of Indigenous children vanished in Canada. The Kamloops graves put Truth and Reconciliation back in the spotlight, where it should always be. Just the number 215 and how we've seen 215 show up repeatedly in orange banners on social media, on t-shirts, and everyone wearing their orange shirts again, which many of you know already as Every Child Matters Day from September 30th every year. And so, we wanted to pull from these headlines to say, this is what we're talking about today. And the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action today about this, and how these headlines, and also the calls to action from Truth and Reconciliation align with our healthcare, align with what we're doing and decisions that we make in healthcare. And ideally, we would all be able to understand why this matters, why these headlines matter to us as healthcare workers and healthcare providers. So that's going to be our discussion today, and we're going to sit around our kitchen table with these aunties and peel back some layers until we have hopefully provided you with some thought-provoking ideas, thoughts, and sayings that will keep adding to your fuel to keep finding ways to help us reconcile. Truth has been told. Thanks, Nikki.
Of course. All right, so we'll take it over to Brittany now.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. I think that this is something that's has been felt deeply by Indigenous people over this past week, that despite this news, colonialism is not something of the past. As Senator Murray Sinclair says, the monster that was created in the residential schools moved into a new house, and that monster now lives in the child welfare system. So our work here in the healthcare system intersects across so many other categories of the TRC calls to action. Our work intersects with justice, child welfare, education, equity, and all other different areas of reconciliation. Some of the health actions that we've been really thinking about more deeply since this news is specifically Action 19, which is for us to establish measurable goals to identify and close gaps in health outcomes between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, with a focus on some key indicators around things like life expectancy, birth rates, infant-child health, chronic disease and illness, and of the availability of appropriate health services. And there's some really concrete calls to action there that we can have a really profound impact on together.
Right. Does anyone else have any comments on that? Miranda or Leslie? What are your thoughts? Oh, you're on mute, Leslie.
I think, again, going back to, the headlines, and I keep hearing Cindy Blackstock in my mind too, who really talks about the child welfare system and the fact that there's more children in care now than ever went to Indian residential school. And if you sit and think about that for a moment, that in itself is horrific. And what can we do? And of course, this is why Miranda, I'm so thankful for her joining our team as we amplify and continue to focus on women and babies in particular, and talking about how, you know, we're always told when we're growing up from our grandmas and aunties as well, babies represent a new day. Babies represent a new opportunity. So babies are just such a gift, which we all know already. And I was sharing with my colleagues here on the panel just yesterday how the late beautiful elder Ray Silver from Thamath that shared with us on the celebration of Laurel's baby, Charlie. And we were having a baby shower for Charlie, and Ray happened to be there because we held it in the Thamath Community Hall, all of our Aboriginal health team from Fraser Health Authority. And I'll never forget his words, because he said it with tears in his eyes. He said, "I'm just so happy that this baby will never see the world that I saw." And that's the way our elders always taught us. Our elders are beautiful elders that share their knowledge with us today, always impart that kind of knowledge to us and say, you know, there's always a new day. There's always a fresh start. And every day we wake up and go, we're here. We're here. I can still say I'm Stalo, and I'm still here. And I'm still here because my ancestors were so strong, and particularly our matriarchs and our life givers. Miranda, I know you have lots of thoughts around this too.
Yeah, thank you to you both. Yeah, I mean, that's such a strong teaching that I've carried as well, is really always thinking to the next generation and how we can try to use the frustration, the anger, the outrage that we feel in service to making the world a better place for the future generations, for our children and our grandchildren and 7 generations ahead. Maybe that's a good time to go to the next slide, Nikki,
Of course.
please. But, you know, in terms of healing and making a better world for the next generation to come, we really do need to learn to sit with the grief that we're all feeling. And you know, Leslie mentioned earlier this collective grief, and I think you can feel it really heavy right now. That was one of the words that came up a lot in the Slido, was heavy. It is heavy right now. But this grief is not new. This grief has existed in our family lines, in our communities for many, many years, for decades, for generations. And, you know, we see that in the impacts of intergenerational trauma and how many of our people are still sitting with grief that they carry from the future generation, or from the past generations, I should say, and their own grief now. And you know, Brittany was mentioning the many intersections of our work. And I think, you know, we can see it within our current context right now with multiple ongoing crises. We have grief related to this discovery, the 215 children. We have grief related to the ongoing pandemic that has been impacting us a lot for more than a year now. We have grief related to ongoing opioid crisis and overdose in our communities that has been going on for many years now, disproportionately impacting our people, our women, our families, our communities. So it does feel heavy, all of this collective grief that we're sitting with right now. And I wanted to speak to how we can walk alongside and support people in their grief. As a birth worker, I recognized that I had a lack of skill in being able to support people in grief. And thankfully, most of the time, birth is a happy experience and a celebratory experience, but sometimes it isn't. and sometimes loss does occur. And so I sought out for my own learning some training related to supporting grief, supporting perinatal loss. And so this is a quote from a book that I wanted to share. I'll share in the chat the name of the book. So this is Alan Wolfett's Tenets of Companioning the Bereaved. Companioning is about honoring the spirit. It is not about focusing on intellect. Companioning is about curiosity. It is not about expertise. Companioning is about learning from others. It is not about teaching. Companioning is about walking alongside. It is not about leading or being led. Companioning is about being still. It is not about frantic movement forward. Companioning is about discovering the gifts of sacred silence. It is not about filling every painful moment with talk. Companioning is about listening with the heart. It is not about analyzing with the head. Companioning is about bearing witness to all the struggles of others. It is not about judging or directing those struggles. Companioning is about being present to another person's pain. It is not about taking away or relieving the pain. Companioning is about respecting disorder and confusion. It is not about imposing order and logic. Companioning is about going to the wilderness of the soul with another human being. It is not about thinking you are responsible for finding the way out. So in our conversations this week, I felt that this was really meaningful and relevant to our work and how we can walk alongside as companions. We don't have all the answers. We're not going to solve all the problems and take all of the pain away, but we can show up as companions. And there's a line in here that reminds me of a teaching that I hear a lot from our elders, that the longest, hardest journey is from here to here, from our head to our heart. And I think that's a journey that we're all on today. So I think about this in the context of my work and how do I walk alongside Indigenous families, Indigenous communities in a good way. Can we move to the next slide?
Of course.
Thanks. And I recognize that this grief, as we've talked about, we have inherited grief, but that's not the only thing that we've inherited from our ancestors. We've also inherited culture, the ability to heal, the ability to bring hope with the next generation, birthing our babies, bringing our new babies into the world. And again, you know, in the context of my birth work, I draw strength from the wisdom that we've inherited from our ancestors. And I wanted to share these two images that were graciously created and shared, meant for sharing by Daybreak Star Doulas. These are Indigenous birth affirmations. And I love to use affirmations when I'm supporting someone in birth. But, you know, birth, when we're laboring, typically birth, the physiology of it involves some pain. It's pretty normal to feel pain through parts, if not all, of labor as we're birthing our babies. But usually as care providers, we're not too concerned when someone says that they're in pain during labor because we know that that's normal, that it's pain with a purpose. So we are learning to support others and sit with them while they're in discomfort, and we're encouraging them to move ahead, to move through that discomfort, because that's the only way you're going to meet the baby, is to move through that discomfort. And there's power in that. There's power in accepting that this is uncomfortable, but I can do this. I can do hard things. And there's a transformation that comes of that. That is the process of birth. You are transforming into a parent and transforming the world by bringing this new baby into the world. So I love that, you know, we can recognize these transformative processes that, yes, they're hard, that it comes with discomfort, it comes with pain, but it's pain with a purpose. And so I apply that to my work now in systems transformation and looking at how we transform healthcare, that, you know, we need to be prepared for it to feel uncomfortable. It's going to be normal to feel discomfort as we're dismantling systems of oppression. That's hard work, but we can do that. We can learn to sit with that discomfort and realize that there's something better on the other side. So we need to work through it. I invite Brittany and Leslie to comment.
I just love this pain with purpose and that whole idea of the analogy of labor, and just thinking about the word labor. That's what we are, right? As a workforce, we're labor. We're labor to the health system, and we do hard things. We've done hard things for the last year and a bit, addressing a global pandemic and coming together with a common purpose to get us through this. And I know the leaders of this organization and all the workers in this organization, they can do hard things. You know, so a little bit of pain with purpose, that little heartache that we have right now, that pain, we have to use it. We have to use it for the greater good. Thank you so much, Miranda. I love your birth work. I love how you share all of that. And it feels so much about the newness of life, the newness of the opportunity to do something different. Brittany?
Yeah, thank you, Miranda. Your words are always so inspiring and comforting to me. I really, you know, obviously I work in research and that's my area, and how we apply, you know, what you've talked about here in the birthing world, the wisdom of our ancestors, that they gave us everything that we need. The way we've applied that in research is to break down the word research to research. We are searching back for the ways that we've already known, for the tools that we already have, before, you know, this colonial disruption happened for our communities, and gaining strength from all of those wise teachings and tools that we had in our basket from before. So I really think that we're at such a turning point right now with everything that's been happening. And from my perspective in the world of Indigenous health, it is actually a really beautiful time because we have this chance now to take action. We have so many ears listening, so many eyes on this, and people are ready to hear the stories and hear the way forward. So yeah, hands up to you, Miranda. Thank you for sharing this.
All right, Leslie, it's back to you again.
Thank you. Yeah, and Brittany already commented, and so did Miranda, the fact that we have an opportunity at a systems level, at a health system, to really disrupt. Always talk about disruption in that pretty much every conversation I ever go into, or any meeting I ever enter into with many of my colleagues and peers across the health system and our external partners as well, I always go in knowing that my job is to ask some questions. My job is to say, can we do it differently? Can we look at how we might want to change this a little bit to ensure that it's more culturally safe and appropriate for the Indigenous population, the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis? And we often talk about, you know, what does it mean to disrupt in a gentle but meaningful way? It is always about setting intentions. We talked about, you know, our intention setting before this session. Every day the intentions are set. How can we be of good use in the system to help with the disruption, to addressing racism in healthcare? We want to address cultural safety and decisions that we make. And never has there been a better time. You know, this last year has been so challenging, but yet so progressive. We have the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. That has now been turned into legislation here in the province of BC, so fondly referred to as DRIPA. I'm not going to pretend that this is our role to embed and uphold the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, because it's actually up to the Indigenous people to determine what that looks like. but we can certainly learn, and we can read it, and we can understand it. In Plain Sight is probably the document that in the last 16, 17 years of doing this work has been the most rewarding experience, is to have this truth-telling document that racism does exist in healthcare. It has always existed in healthcare, and we knew that, but we didn't have proof. So Mary Ellen Turple-Lafon and her team were able to uncover the truth by interviewing thousands of people, surveying thousands of people, and now we have some truth telling. Now we have something to build off of. There's no more denying it. And so how do we work to address? There's 24 recommendations in here. We've got a lot of work to do. We can just keep adding all of these recommendations from all of these documents and keep charting our path forward, which we have been doing, or we can actually open up our heart and mind and read these documents, read these testimonials. There's truth telling here. And if we don't honor the truth tellers for sharing their story by simply reading with an open mind and an open heart, so we can actually absorb this to add that fuel to the work that we want to do. In Plain Sight is a difficult read, but it is, it's a path forward to us, is my understanding, and the way I'm appreciating all of these documents, including Truth and Reconciliation. I am committed, and I know all of my team is committed here in Vancouver Coastal Health, and all of our partners. We hope that you come along this journey with us, a commitment to continually breathe life into these documents, that they aren't just going to sit on a shelf. We know we've had many other documents that have been written over the last decades that haven't resulted in change or enough change. So my commitment in my role and everything I do with my partners throughout the Health Authority is to breathe life into these documents and make them real and keep them alive. I know, Brittany, you do a lot of system level transformation. We've talked about the importance of having a research team embedded into the Indigenous health team, because we have to take that evidence and turn it into change. So sometimes we're stuck, right? We don't know what the best practice is yet, so we're trying different things, but we do know what the devastating data has told us for a very long time. And so Brittany and her team are really helping us to take that knowledge, that truth telling that shows up as research and evidence, and turn it into action. Additional thoughts from my other aunties?
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. For the research, we're really trying to embed Indigenous voices into the research to really disrupt how research is typically done, through having our Indigenous matriarchs lead research projects with us and for us, and really privileging the Indigenous community voice in all of the evidence that we're creating, and continue to challenge some of the ways that academic systems or the way our research systems work, which may create barriers for getting this evidence through to our teams and to creating innovative interventions or programs that best serve Indigenous patients and clients, and to shake that up and find ways to do it differently and in partnership with so many other teams across the health system as well.
Yeah, I would just add that I really appreciate that concept of research and really the reclamation that comes with that, of Indigenous people shaping our own narratives. And I don't know what it is about In Plain Sight, but just in my opinion and where I'm situated within the Health Authority, I do really feel like it's triggered conversations that haven't been triggered for whatever reason up until now. I think there's something very unique about the way that In Plain Sight has shared stories that is resonating with people. And I really think this is a key time to take advantage of these opportunities we have for systems transformation.
Yeah, thanks, Miranda. I totally agree. I think In Plain Sight, led by an Indigenous woman, Mary Ellen Triple-Lafon, and her team, as I understand, the majority were Indigenous. So I think the storytelling comes out in there, which is just our way, an Indigenous way is sharing through stories and being witness, right? So we, as a health system, anybody who wasn't involved with this, you become a witness to it, right? And witnesses have roles in our world as well. And their role is to continue to tell the story. Repeat, 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 repeat and learn.
Absolutely. I know one of the other things that came up in the discussion with us over the last few days was this concept of the need for moral courage. And I know Cindy Blackstock spoke about it at length in her amazing talk last year at the summit. Did you want to say more about that, Leslie?
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. I think we're all fangirls of Cindy Blackstock. She says things that some of us can't put into words, and she's been fighting for Indigenous children for decades, and I think she's winning. I think she's in the win side now. But yeah, she talked about moral courage, and that's what we're asking people to not only companion, which is my new favorite phrase that Miranda just introduced us to, but also show that moral courage, particularly in an organization that is value-based, right? We're always being asked to live our values, and how are you demonstrating that? That's moral courage. It's also moral courage to start conversations that are difficult, which we often do as well as Indigenous health leaders. We're asking our colleagues, our allies and peers to have the moral courage to help with this conversation and have the conversation, and not just lean on the Indigenous team and the Indigenous health leaders to lead that conversation. I know, Brittany, you have lots to add about Cindy Blackstock and her ideas. And I love this quote of reconciliation means not having to say sorry a second time. But I also acknowledge that reconciliation is new to everybody, and we do have to practice reconciliation and practice and practice.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. I'm definitely a Cindy fangirl, that's for sure. Love reading everything that she writes and holding her words close with me in this work. The moral courage thing that stood out for me that she was talking about, and we've talked about this several times, envisioning that you have a basket of knowledge. Maybe that's a basket of knowledge about the history, the colonial history, Canadian history, maybe, doing some hard work, doing some reading, some learning, having some tough conversations with colleagues or with Indigenous friends or family, and really to envision that as, filling your basket of knowledge on these issues. And with that basket, you have tools at your disposal, tools that can help you have the moral courage when you see something happening, when you hear a conversation, when you see an interaction that maybe you don't feel is culturally safe, or you come across somebody who doesn't have all of those tools in their toolbox and needs to have some tough conversation. And for us, having more people out there with all of that knowledge base and with the moral courage to have those tough conversations, that really takes a lot of the burden off of Indigenous people, Indigenous colleagues, to have to do all of that translational work and education on the historical context all the time. So to me, that's really what moral courage means, is really drawing upon all of those resources that someone has collected and learned and gained through really actively participating in the learning journey, And then when they're equipped with that, that will help build the moral courage to stand up and advocate and walk alongside us in this transformation.
So back to the comment I made earlier about truth tellers and honoring the story. So Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and I frantically looked this morning for a copy of it. I'm moving desks, so I lost my copy. I wanted to kind of quote how many Indigenous survivors of Indian residential school provided their testimony. I know it was thousands and thousands. And for us not to honor that brave gesture of opening up that history, that pain, that trauma, to retell their story to Murray Sinclair and the rest of his commission, and not to do it justice, the same as in plain sight, to not give honor to all of those people that shared their stories, to the families who are coming forward to share that they were that they attended Kamloops Indian Residential School and the impact. I know I have an uncle who attended Kamloops Indian Residential School and is feeling a lot of grief right now and a lot of guilt, which is just so hard to actually process. Why would you feel guilty, Uncle? Well, guilt comes from coming home alive, to having a full life where he has been able to, raise a family, beautiful family, 3 children, grandsons, and there's guilt. And that's so sad to me, but I know it's true. So I want to honor his truth too, of sharing what that means. And then I think about all the other students that did get to go home from Kamloops, and could you imagine that they feel guilty for that? My mother-in-law also was just speaking with my husband about this yesterday, about she's now having memories that are coming back to her. She went to St. Michael's in Alert Bay, and we know this is happening clear across the country, where survivors of Indian residential school are having their traumas triggered, their memories are coming back. We just have to be so gentle and kind and honor them and not rush through this purposeful pain is to help us to learn so it never happens again. So really honoring these stories, that's our intention of this circle, of doing these sessions, is to ensure that we are breathing life into these testimonies, into these stories, into the recommendations. Recommendations that come very well thought out too, of ways that we can impact systemic and structural change so that the grieving can ease, that we can see some light and hope for our children and our grandchildren, our great-great-grandchildren. I'm going to ask Miranda if she's got more to share about, our teachings around honoring these stories as witnesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Leslie. A couple of our teachings and practices came to mind as Stalo people we know in our ceremony. We have MCs who are appointed kind of as the speakers for the ceremony, that the family calling for the work is often sitting really close to that, and it can be really emotional. And so we bring in someone who's a bit outside of the work happening, who can be an MC and who can help spread that message and share the words through ceremony in a really powerful, impactful way, and support the family to do that work so that the family can really experience the ceremony. And in our ceremonies, we also call witnesses. And, often those witnesses are sharing words at the end about what they witnessed, what they experienced, what they're taking away, and their responsibility to carry forward the legacy of the work that happened, and as part of our oral history, remembering the work that happened. And you were asking us just before we started today how we were feeling. And to be honest, I was feeling some butterflies, and it felt like when I've been called as a witness in ceremony and I get those butterflies, like, oh man, what am I going to share after this? I have this responsibility now to carry with me. And that responsibility, it can make us feel nervous. How do we speak to this? It is a responsibility that we carry. But we owe that to the families, to the communities. We have to honor these stories that have been shared, because people who shared them, they put their hearts out there. That was incredibly hard work to do, to share those stories. And so we owe it to listen and to witness and to internalize that. What does that mean to me? Now that I've witnessed this, how do I take this forward and take the next step and spread this message so that people know about the work that happened?
Yeah, thank you so much, Miranda. All right, let's talk with Brittany a little bit then. I know, Brittany, one of the things that you talked about was productive outrage, and how we can channel all these feelings into something that's useful, because there's a lot of emotions going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think as an Indigenous person in this work, and it takes on an inherent advocate role. And when you're working as an advocate for something, whether it's social justice or reconciliation, you can find that things that you see and the injustices that you see can really, just fuel you and can make you so outraged. And there is kind of a productive level to that. There's, we waver in this zone of, if you're too outraged, you just won't be able to take action. If you're not outraged enough, you won't have that fire in your belly to push you forward to keep taking action. And I really wanted to share this visual of, we can make change one conversation, one piece of legislation at a time. I think that these issues look like they're so big, and they are so big, they are so complex, and it feels like, what can I do as one person? What can I do as one person to make a change? And so I just want to invite, everyone listening to not let the fear paralyze you from applying the knowledge that you gain. And this brilliant woman, Danielle Koch, says that lack of action turns allyship into an accessory. So, how can we fill those baskets of knowledge and skills and tools so that each and every one of us can actually take little actions or big actions towards making change? And also, how do we ensure that the work that we're doing in our lives, not just our lives in the workplace, but our lives outside of the workplace, are all things that are making us a good ancestor for our future generations? Each and everything that we do in our work, in our activism, can really pave the way for a better future for our children and grandchildren. And again, Danielle says, with every painful blow of injustice, the question should no longer be, what easy thing can I do to help now, but what hard things must I do to help for a lifetime?
Yeah, thank you so much.
We do hard things. This is what we do. We do hard things. I really love that saying. And some people do want to get off with what's the easy, quick thing I can do. And often it involves writing a check or opening up their checkbook, and that's good too. I think we need money for sure. Money does help with a lot of this, but productive pain again, right? We're talking about this labor that we have, the cost of things. I remember, again, just share another day of trauma in our work, September 30th last year, which was also Orange Shirt Day. And I remember, Brittany, you and I talking for sure that day. We were just done. The story of Joyce Ekashon had come out. It hit me so hard. It wasn't our health system, but it was our health system, right? The bigger health system. And I remember thinking, I just, that productive anger, it was so heavy on me that day. That was the first day in my whole work life, and I've been doing this health work, disrupting health systems, since 2005 to now. And that was the first time I can honestly say I felt like giving up. I felt like, what the heck is going on? I've been busting my butt here trying to change these systems, and this kind of stuff can still happen. I know collectively, all of us as healthcare providers, particularly Indigenous health providers and leaders, that one hit us so hard. It was Brian Sinclair all over again. And if you don't know these stories, please go find out. I'm going to say that that day, as much as I went way down and was like, outrage, we came back up again. We came back up again and said, yeah, let's get ready for more. Let's just get ready for more. We know Mary Ellen's report's coming out. There's going to be more truth telling. And we as witnesses in the healthcare system can no longer just stand by and read these and listen to these stories without getting, angry. Let's get upset. Let's get mad. Let's get really mad, because that fuels us to change, right? You don't want things to happen over again when you've been angered by it, right? So thank you again for productive pain, productive anger. I think it really does help us to fuel and change these systems.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to add another slide of yours, Brittany. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about allyship and solidarity and what that looks like.
Yeah, as we were talking about the tools in the toolbox, and, as Indigenous leaders, we've had so many asking us questions over the past week, what can I learn? What can I do? Where do I find more information? Or, and that sense of powerlessness that some people have, what can I do as one person? And I really liked this visual anatomy of an ally, using our mouth to speak out about injustice when we see it, using our nose to sniff out implicit bias, to do that hard, uncomfortable work of examining ourselves. And each and every one of us needs to spend time and be mindful of doing that. Using our eyes to identify the positionalities that we have, the positions of privilege that we have. And, most importantly, I think using our ears to listen to experiences of marginalized people, experiences of people living in systems of oppression, and particularly, hearing from Indigenous colleagues right now, and friends and community members. And now we've had tragedy in the Muslim community as well this week, really just listening with open hearts and open minds to these experiences. And that will help cultivate empathy. That this work is heart work. This work is not intellectualized. We can try to intellectualize it as much as we want, but it really comes down to cultivating that heart work and really deeply connecting in a relational way to people. And then using our hands to take action, to make change, and having, that productive anger, productive outrage to fuel us as well. Miranda, do you have any other thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I love this. And it does remind me of one of our teachings that I used to hear a lot from our elders, that we have 2 eyes and 2 ears, but only 1 mouth. So let's do lots of watching, observing, lots of listening, and knowing when to kind of pass off the mic and center whose voices are being centered.
Yeah. I thought of that too, Miranda. Always 2 ears, 1 mouth. So we're listening more and talking less. But in this one too, I thought about our eyes and what we see. And like I mentioned earlier, we're pulling from the headlines, and these headlines aren't going away, right? And I started to feel it quite heavy and daunting to turn on social media, turn on the radio, turn on the news, and you hear about the trauma in the Indian residential school over and over again. And it'd be easy to look away. It'd be easy to shut that down and say, you know, I've had enough. I don't want to hear about this anymore. It's too heartbreaking, right? But we owe it to this population to keep reading, keep seeing it. Don't look away, right? That productive pain again, we got to keep looking. Look at it straight on. Don't look away. Don't look away.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I like what you said, Brittany, about making those larger connections, like that sort of overarching colonialism and how it impacts like all marginalized people. So you talked about the Islamophobia that's going on right now, and there's anti-Black racism and the stuff that's going on in the province, environmental racism, and how that's all part of a larger system. And it's, yeah, absolutely. Getting angry, I think, now is the time. All right, let me take you next to, this is you again, Brittany. Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, this is an invitation to action. We want to invite you to continue your learning journey, to continue channeling, you know, these difficult conversations, these difficult feelings into action. So we're inviting you all to please set an intention for how you will commit to these calls to action. Maybe it's in your practice, in your work, in your daily life. Maybe it's simply having more of these conversations, doing more reading, doing more learning. So what will you commit to doing? And we're inviting everyone to add an intention or a commitment into the chat box, and to share if you feel comfortable doing so. I think it would be beautiful to see the chat lit up with intentions of commitment for our way forward and how we're going to channel this work into something great and some great actions.
That's amazing. So yeah, if people want to enter their commitments into the chat, that's awesome. And we can sort of follow along while we move into this next sort of phase. We're going to begin taking questions in a moment. Please enter your questions in the Q&A and your commitments in the chat. I hope that's not too complicated, but that way we can separate things out a little easier for everyone. And yeah. I want to pull up the support slide that I'm going to have just available for folks if you want to discuss with someone afterwards. There's a lot of complicated feelings. The first support is primarily for Indigenous folks and others. And the lower one is from the new LifeWorks, formerly known as EFAP, for employees. And yeah, but let's have a look at what's going on in the chat. I see we've got all kinds of things coming through. So people are going to reading the calls to action. Absolutely. Yeah. Complete the OCAP course, the research course within an Aboriginal or Indigenous lens. Using their heart to create empathy. Reading the calls to action again, lots of that. Enrolled in the Indigenous Canada course in Alberta, the online course that's free for everyone in Canada to take, the Coursera. People are going to read the TRC report and In Plain Sight in full. Someone is going to keep media accountable for their reporting. Absolutely. There's a lot of harmful reporting that occurs. Racism shows up in the media as well, and following Indigenous reporters like Angela Starrett and others, listening and learning, having difficult conversations. As a manager, ensuring all staff are able to view the webinar series. And that's a good reminder. This webinar is being recorded, and the webinar, along with all the resources that we shared today, including the companioning quote, the book that has it, will be on our our Indigenous Cultural Safety Learning Resources page, and we will share that in the chat feature so you know where to find it. If you just Google Indigenous Cultural Safety on the internet, it'll come up as well. Yeah, lots of commitments coming through.
Nikki, I think I just saw one too that I think is really important. I'd like to just kind of highlight. We've been training thousands of VCH employees with our online, not our online, but our in-person training here at Vancouver Coastal Health, our Indigenous Cultural Safety Foundational Training. And also many staff have gone through SANYAS, and we continue to create opportunities like this, these kinds of webinars, or our virtual summit too, like we did last year, where hundreds and hundreds of staff attended. We are in a virtual world now, so we're just putting our cultural safety training online fully, just as we're going to get ready to open up for business again. But anyway, we'll always have that content, which will be important to us. But what we notice is when we ask people, you know, we first introduce our training, it's usually in person. I would say 9 out of 10 people, pretty much 9 out of 10, say they had no idea of this history. And our training is really truth telling. It goes through about 500 years of history in a timeline format, and we talk about it. And I'm never ever surprised, because I too went through the school system and didn't learn about it either. So we weren't taught in school. Some of the younger generation are starting to really understand and learn, and have found their own way of learning. But those of us that are anywhere over, 35 plus, likely did not learn about it in school. And so it was never talked about around the dining room table, the kitchen table, like we're doing today. And so it is up to us to start having these conversations with our families. I'll never forget one participant that after he was done, he said, I'm going home and I'm inviting all my adult children back home for dinner this weekend, and we're going to talk about what I just learned. And I thought, what a beautiful commitment that was. And it's going to be a hard conversation as he opens up and admits to his children that, he didn't know something, right? What? Dad didn't know something? And sharing with his adult children. So I think that's another really great commitment to make, is to just be able to start having these conversations with your family and your friends who are likely the same age as you and who did not learn it in the school system.
Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, I'm just scanning through the Q&A right now, and there's so much chat here. A lot of people are asking specifically about the In Plain Sight report and where they can get a copy. As a non-Indigenous person, I think that's our homework to do, respectfully. We'll post a PDF of it on the Cultural Safety Learning Resources page for sure. People can print copies off like we all did here at the office and share it with your teams. As far as hard copies, yeah, you can contact those folks directly. I know people want to have a copy provided for each and every staff member. We're trying to save paper and save the environment too, so there's that.
Maybe we could get one hard copy for each team to share. Let me look into that. I'll certainly commit to that.
Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, people are also talking about, let's see, someone was talking about how they do, someone said, as a social worker, I'm painfully aware of my profession's role in taking Indigenous children from their homes, both in the past and in the present. While they do not work in child protection, they feel a level of responsibility for this negative impact, and wanted to know if you have any suggestions on how they can contribute to reconciliation and change as a social worker. Good question.
That's a great question. And in fact, I think Miranda and I have been talking about this, about how, if we can attach to young women early, before they even decide if they're going to have children, support learning, support education. And what if the goal was to make sure that children stayed with their mothers, right? If that was the goal, what would we have to do? So, Miranda, I know this is near and dear to your heart, and I know you have some good advice for our social workers.
Yeah, thank you. I think, it is a tough question because there is that legacy of social work involvement, and that continues today. And I can certainly say, in my experience supporting families in that pregnancy, welcoming baby period, there's a lot of fear about social workers. Even just the suggestion that like, oh, do you want to talk to a social worker? People will shut down. There is a lot of fear associated with social workers. And it's a challenge because often social workers will have resources to offer. But if it involves talking to a social worker first, families would rather bypass those resources altogether. So I do think that there's room for us to think about how we connect families to resources, and if it's not a social worker, is there someone else who could be involved to help families navigate the system and find the resources that they need? But I also think, as a social worker, can you be having these conversations, going back to the institutions that train social workers, and start these conversations with folks before they even start their practice, and really changing the next generation of social workers coming up to really know this history before they're even out there working in community. As Leslie said, our education systems are changing, are becoming more responsive. My oldest daughter is in grade 1. In her kindergarten year, she started learning about residential schools on September 30th. So within her first month of starting kindergarten, she was learning about residential schools. And that's certainly different than the experience that I had of like essentially no education at all. Until I sought it out in my university years, and I took elective courses to finally start learning this history within an educational institution. But I learned about it from my elders, from elders in community who were generous enough to share their stories with me as a youth. So yeah, within social work, I really think it's about trying to have these conversations and listening to those stories of the folks who are willing to share their stories. Again, as we've been saying, honoring those stories, bringing those stories forward, making sure people are aware of it.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the keys too is, from this truth telling and from this learning of the history of Indigenous people, it is about looking past what's in front of you in the moment and just knowing that there's such a good chance that person is a intergenerational survivor of Indian residential school. So that interruption of parenting, that interruption of, as Brittany was saying, we're researching because, our matriarchal way, our life-giving way, we were taught and taken by our grandmothers and aunties as young women to learn about taking care of yourself and your baby. Now imagine if that was still continuing to this day. Our babies wouldn't be in care. They wouldn't be, because we would know fully and wholly what our responsibility was. We were taught that. So I think I just encourage everyone to just look past what you see, because what you see is actually a result of something deeper and probably quite horrific. Brittany, did you have some thoughts too? Or Miranda, you had some additions?
Yeah, just you triggered my thinking. We were talking earlier about walking gently alongside folks and thinking about social workers. I think that's another thing that we can do, and that's something that I really try to do as a doula, is walking gently beside new parents, beside families, and reminding them that they do know how to do this. We've internalized this messaging, the stereotype that as Indigenous people, we're not good parents. And that came up in the In Plain Sight report. A lot of people felt like in their healthcare system interactions that they were treated as if they're inadequate parents. We need to deprogram that thinking from our minds, and we need folks to walk gently beside us and remind us that we are good parents. We know how to do this. That is part of that research that we do as Indigenous people, and reclaiming that we know how to parent. We are the only people that know how to parent our own kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, this came up in my PhD research, actually, in discussion with community, that the surveillance on Indigenous women, Indigenous moms, is very real, and is something that is inherently shaping how Indigenous mothers are parenting their children out of fear, and that colonial legacy, or the current colonialism that affects child welfare, is still just affecting women and moms so deeply. And, I had one mom tell me that, she has fear every time even letting her kids play outside, because there's the fear of judgment. There's the fear that a social worker might see or a neighbor might report it. And so what came to mind, building on both of your comments, was, challenging some of these colonial narratives of parenting and the individualism that we see in that it's only one parent that provides all the guidance, or one person that really parents a child. And that's not how it is seen from an Indigenous lens and view. And like Miranda said, how can these systems walk alongside not just the mums, but the grandmothers, the aunts, the families, to provide a whole family approach to how we care for Indigenous children. And that's something that I think we really haven't been looking at enough, and is definitely a way forward for us in this.
Absolutely. It's our way, and we have to be allowed to be that way again, and have to be encouraged. Again, aunties play a huge role in our communities, because children always feel like they can say more to their auntie than they do to their own mom or to their grandma. So I love that we keep talking about aunties, and that this is, aunties dialogue, and the circle of aunties, and, and uncles, and anyone else that wants to identify that way. You are gold. And I would encourage you to just keep having those kinds of conversations. Do we have some more questions, Nikki?
Yeah, we have so many. We've got one here. Miranda's quote about companioning the bereaved has really resonated with a lot of folks. This comment is from a manager in a busy healthcare environment, and said that the quote really resonated with them, and that they learned the lesson earlier this week that they don't always have to try and fix and solve problems, but listen with their heart and walk alongside their staff. And asking you three, how do you suggest leaders balance leading alongside staff with a companioning approach, and leading with an action approach as well? So you want to get stuff done, but you also want to support people and sit with them in solidarity.
That's a leader all the time, no matter what, right? We're always trying to reach some goals, usually some strategic system-wide goals, while managing where people are at, their capacity, their willingness, their abilities. So it's a constant dance. On this topic, I think it's led more with just making sure that we're leading with that heart-centered vision, right? Some people will absolutely not be able to hear these stories. They just absolutely won't be able to deal with this kind of trauma. And I wouldn't want to force it on anyone. As much as I encourage, you have to be strong enough. We don't know where people have come from. We don't know what their history is with trauma, with colonization. They might have come from somewhere else where they've already had horrific experiences led by governments and the privileged. So I'd be very careful and cautious, but encouraging people to grow still, to be part of the difference. Maybe we take more of a team approach, so that some people can do some of the more heavy lifting while others, cheerlead a little bit more. So I think we have to be very careful, and again, very compassionate and empathetic, and show good, strong leadership in meeting everybody where they're at. It's a journey. I always say it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Thanks, Leslie. Does anyone else want to add? Brittany?
I'll just add that, the companioning aspect is something that is present in Indigenous leadership because it's so relational. And also, we really know the importance of Indigenous people leading this work. So that means our teams are Indigenous people. Our teams are folks who this history is so personal to. So as leaders, we not only have to, fuel that action, but also look after our own people on our teams. And that's been something real and present in our lives over this past, week or so, but not even just that, over the past, year of a pandemic. And every time some devastating news comes out, we have to care for ourselves and care for each other. And that's just an extra layer, I think, on top of the already really tough job of Indigenous leadership.
Yeah, I think Leslie said it so well that we really have to try to meet people where they're at. I think it's such a great question, and it's something that we are all working through. When I first heard the question posed, I was like, oh, thank goodness Leslie jumped in first. Because that is a question that I have, and that's something that I would bring to our team, and we can talk through. This is our governance approach, our matriarch approach, is to talk these things through together. None of us are in this work alone. It's crushingly hard to try to do this work all by yourself. So draw on the people around you, find your people, the people that you can sit in circle with and talk these things through. And allowing folks to choose or not choose to show up when it's right for them. We invite people in, we encourage them, but we cannot demand people come, because we, as Leslie said, we don't know what they're dealing with, how they may be triggered, but we make it an open invitation to please come join us in these conversations, come join us in this work when you're ready. And being able to offer different options, different ways that people can engage, that can help too, for folks who maybe aren't wanting to come present like this or come to a public forum, but maybe would rather process their feelings through writing, through journaling, through art. There's so many ways to do this work. And there's no one right or wrong way that we can define what that looks like for each of you.
Exactly. And I'll just add one more thing that we always, particularly when Brittany and I talk to folks about research, please don't just put one Indigenous person in the center of this work, or the one Indigenous person on your team, and ask them to explain it all to the rest of the team. Right? So we're really wanting to say, please take good care of your Indigenous staff member, your team member, your colleague, your peer, your friend, and support them. We're a team of Indigenous people. We warmly welcome any Indigenous employees of Vancouver Coastal Health to reach into our team, come share with us. We have the most beautiful circle of elders attached to our program, led by the beautiful elder Dr. Roberta Price, Glyda Morgan, Doris Watts. There's just so many of these beautiful matriarchs and our gentlemen as well, elders who support our team, who help us grieve, help us celebrate. And I really just want to make sure all of the Indigenous employees in Vancouver Coastal Health know that they can reach our team. And Nikki and Jake are going to put up some links to our team, to our resources. And I'm looking at the clock and seeing how much time has already passed this conversation with you. Our Aunties Around the Kitchen Table talk. It's just been absolutely fabulous to have this time to share. I'm so glad that Brittany, Miranda, and I were able to get through this hard work, share with you in a good way, and keep ourselves composed at a very difficult, dark time for our people. I know we've been up and down with our emotions and grief and sadness, and then turning it into this feisty conversations that we usually have about change and the warrior women that we are, stepping up and helping all of our colleagues. At one point, I think there was 427 people signed on. So I think that's just absolutely amazing and speaks to the interest and the need of Vancouver Coastal Health staff, friends and colleagues.
Thank you so much, Leslie, Brittany, and Miranda. I think I speak on behalf of everyone to say that we're so grateful for your leadership and your teachings. I'm always learning, and I'm striving to role model how that happens for others with cultural humility and solidarity. And I hope we inspire that in you today, folks. Holding up the knowledge keepers and the aunties today. So much gratitude. I have one last question. It's a fast one. Someone asked about, you were talking about Orange Shirt Day last year, and you shared a quote. Was that Ray Silver, Leslie?
Oh, I shared about the late elder Ray Silver saying to us at Charlie's baby shower that he was just so thankful to see this baby, and that the baby was never going to see the world the way he did. And that is always, again, one of the teachings we have from our grandmothers and our aunties is babies offer hope. Babies offer a fresh new start in that, their feet have never touched this earth yet, but yet they will know that this is the land that they come from. And we always say that this land that we come from. I saw another question in the chat about land acknowledgement, and I encourage you again to go to our intranet site for Indigenous cultural safety and watch a short film clip there from Hereditary Chief Ian Campbell, who talks about land acknowledgements and the importance of land acknowledgement. We always, as Indigenous people, when I say to Miranda or Brittany, where you from? That's Indigenous language for where do you belong? Which land did you come from? So we always talk about being from the land. As Indigenous people, I know it's slightly different for people who say, oh yeah, I live over there. I live in West Van, or I live wherever, right? It's different for us. We talk about the earth as in the land where we come from. That's where our roots are. That's where our ancestors walked the land for thousands and thousands of years. Always a privilege. Thank you so much on behalf of Miranda, Brittany, Nikki, Jake behind the scenes. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Thank you for starting. If this is the start of your journey, thank you for starting the journey of reconciliation with us. Thank you for understanding and taking our stories as the role of witness. So you've witnessed some stories, you witnessed our sharing, you witnessed the language we like to use around productive pain. And please take this forward, start having conversations with your team, with your colleagues, with your leaders. And we're going to be here again next week to talk a bit more about this, and every Wednesday after that until we have nothing left to talk about. Thank you so much, everybody. I wish you all well and full of gratitude that you joined us. Be safe, be well. Thank you.
Thank you.